Yeah. So we can get started, and I'm sure other people will join us, but we might as well try and stay on time because we actually have a lot of content we want to cover today. So I think this would be great. Thank you guys all so much for joining us, whether you're by phone or you're by video. We thought that this would be an engaging way to try and do these calls. First of all, welcome. Thank you for being with us. So you may be familiar with names and voices, but not necessarily faces. So we're going to do a little bit of staff introduction. Then we're going to do roll call. We'll also answer any logistical questions about the video call before we head into our actual agenda. So I'll start and then we'll go around the room. So I'm Susan Daniels, Susan Morrison Daniels. I was class of 2001 from Conn, and I am Director of Leadership Gifts here at the college. I'm also acting as interim director of the Connecticut College Fund. So really excited to be with all of you today.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Schulke. I've been with Connecticut College for exactly 2 years now. I am Associate Director of Annual Giving, working with the classes of 1984 through 1993, and I also work with fundraising for our Camel Athletics Fund.
I'm Lynn Kreider. I've been with college almost 9 years. I work with the classes from 1950 to 1966, and also with our parent giving.
And I'll introduce our guest speaker, John Nugent, in just a moment.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ellen Bremner. I've been with the college for about 7 years now. I work with classes 1973 to 83 and 2000 to 2004, and I work with the 40th, the 45th, and the 20th reunions.
So I'm Jenna McLean. I've been with the college for 2.5 years now. I work with our classes from 2005 to 2019, and then also oversee our senior giving programs. So that means I am working with the 5th, the 10th, and the 15th reunions this year.
Hi everyone, Brittany Richard. I have been with the college similar to Jenna, just over 2.5 years or so. I work with the classes of 1994 through 1999 and 1967 to 1972, so the 25th and 50th reunions this year. And I also oversee the 1911 Society, so kind of our leadership level giving.
Hi everyone, I'm Gwen Hay and I'm the annual giving coordinator. I work with the classes in the 40s and I help oversee a lot of our email communications and work with programming.
Great, thank you all. Do you want to cover a couple of logistical things regarding the video conference call?
All right, yeah, so for those of you who are new to using Zoom, we are also, but just to let you know, if you want to share your face with us, you can go to the bottom left-hand corner and just hit the video camera icon, and that will hide you or show you. Additionally, you can also mute by going to the lower left-hand corner and hitting the microphone. But what we're going to do is, when we start talking, we're going to mute you all until the question and answer section after John is finished speaking. So just so you know. And I think that's it.
Great. So we'll go into roll call of our volunteers.
Yeah, so what we're going to do is roll call now. So we'll do it by decade. So I will start with the 1950s. If anyone's here from the 1950s, please let us know your name and your class year. Okay. 1960s. All right. 1970s. Anyone? Okay. 1980s.
Tom Liptak, class of 1986.
Hi, Tom.
Hi.
Anyone else? Okay. 1990s.
Jennifer Mann, class of 94.
Hi, Karen Pratt, class of 91.
Eric Brockmeyer, class of 97.
Great. All right. Thank you, everyone. And anyone? Yes, I got 2000s.
I thought you were just giving up. Okay.
Anyone from the 2000s? 2010 to present?
Oh,
Janelle Tejada, class of
Oh,
2015.
Hi, Janelle. All right,
Boswell, class of 2010.
Hi, Michael.
great. All right. Okay, thank you so much. And I'd also like to welcome our new class gift officer, Caroline Glass. I don't think she was able to make the call today, but she's from the class of 2018, and we're very excited to have her on board.
great. All right, so I'm just going to do a little update on the Connecticut College Fund and, as many of you know, our CRM update. So our CRM update, as many of you know, we were converting from a system we'd used for about 20 years to Salesforce, which is a much more robust program. It's going to do tremendous things for what we can do and how we can reach out to alumni and parents and other donors. As with many conversions, it has been a bit more of a challenge than we anticipated. So, so we had one game plan going in. We're in a little bit of a different place. So just wanted to let you all know, because you may be hearing from your classmates. So we stopped using our previous database on October 11th. We have not been able to enter any gifts in our system since that time. We have been manually tracking them and acknowledging them through phone calls and emails personally. And we, you know, this has just taken a lot longer than we anticipated. We thought we'd be able to send out formal acknowledgements and receipts sooner, but we are now going through a manual process to do that this week. So I just want you to all be sure that if you have questions, if you're hearing from anybody, that you know, but we are doing things manually at this point. We do hope to be live by the end of this week. And then, you know, we'll be working through some bugs going forward, but the outcome of this is going to be significantly improved and well worth the wait. But there's a little bit of growing pains right now. So thank you all for your patience, but please give us any feedback or questions that are coming. Please just make sure to be in touch with your liaison as those arise. So we have been able to look at, based on some manual tracking, where we are for the Connecticut College Fund at this point in the year. And so some of these are rough numbers, but and we'll know for sure once we're able to enter everything into the system. But we have raised just under $3 million so far this year, literally $2.996 million, which is awesome. It's about $300,000 ahead of where we were a year ago today. So that is great news. Our goal this year, as many of you know, is 6.75 million, which is higher than in the past based on some different changes that we're making. So we're well on our way to achieving that goal. Feels really good. We still have December to go. We are tracking a little bit behind in donors compared to last year and the year before. That was something we focused on a lot in the spring last year. And with this information, you know, it just tells us how important the December outreach is for everybody through volunteer outreach, the communications that are going to come from us, and clearly the end of calendar year giving that people make. We're hopefully going to see that tick up. So, one of the great things that this team decided to do this year is to try and bring in some guest speakers to these calls that will help you in your work as volunteers. And so really excited to have John Nugent with us today. Let me tell you a little bit about John, and then we're going to spend the majority of our time hearing from him, really interesting statistics, and I think will be valuable talking points for all of you. So, so John is our Director of Institutional Research and Planning. He has been in that role since 2003. He was a professor at Conn since 2000, right? And then moved over to be Director of Institutional Research and Planning in 2003. So his area directs a broad program of data collection, analysis, and reporting on the college. So obviously not just talking about giving, we're talking about student statistics, faculty statistics, so that we can make thoughtful and strategic decisions, plans, and also help with our marketing. So he responds to data requests both on campus and off campus. There are a lot of rankings and institutional data requests that come from all over the country. So he's responsible for all of that. And then aside from that, he also serves on the Holleran Center for Community Action and Public Policy Steering Committee. So he's got a real hand in the academic side as well. So John has an undergraduate degree in political science from the University of Iowa and a PhD in government from the University of Texas at Austin. Is that the Longhorns? So John is going to talk to us today about the role of alumni giving in college rankings. We all hear about US News and World Report. We know that it's only one factor, but it's what a lot of people talk about. Where's our ranking? Where do we come in this year? So the alumni giving piece is a component of that ranking and quite a valuable one. So we would really, we hope that it will be helpful for you all to hear, why that's important and how we can move the lever on that statistic to help our rankings. Hope it will be helpful to you. John is going to present for us a presentation for about 10-15 minutes, and then we'll have some Q&A at the end. And I think just because of the video conference call, if you have questions, please write them down or whatever, and we'll do that all with the Q&A at the end. So you should momentarily see the slideshow come up. Oh, okay, you can see it now, I believe. And off we go to John.
All right, well, thank you very much. I think people in my position have a love-hate relationship about college rankings. On the one hand, we get to be sort of the wizards and understand how the formulas work and be able to explain perhaps from year to year why we went up or down or how other institutions are doing. On the other hand, there are well-known critiques of these kinds of rankings. Do they really measure what's most important at a college? But all that aside, I think we've come to a place at the institution where we understand that they're unavoidable. They are an important way that prospective students and their families come to think about where institutions stand relative to one another, kind of in the pecking order nationally and so forth. So we do take them very seriously. We respond to them, I think, aggressively within the rules that are laid out for how to count things, how to report them, what to include, and so on and so forth. So a couple goals for today's talk to give you an understanding of how alumni giving factors into US News rankings. There's quite a number of indicators and metrics that go into the formula. Alumni giving is part of that, and we'll kind of put it into some context of how important a part of it is. Second, to give a sense of where Connecticut College stands relative to other schools in terms of alumni giving. And then third, what it would take to move the needle on our giving rate in a way that would help us in the US News rankings, aside from the other ways that the Advancement Office measures and monitors progress or success on that in any particular year. So I want to talk first about how US News measures and defines alumni giving. It does on this metric, what it does on some of the others, which is kind of rather than reinvent the wheel and define it in some new way, it sort of piggybacks on the ways that institutions report this elsewhere. So there's an organization called the Council for Advancement Education that does a survey of advancement offices across the country at institutions of higher ed. And it more or less adopts those definitions and says, report to us each year the same numbers you reported to them. It's one way to keep people from reporting different things to different surveys and organizations. So it basically asks us to report the percentage of all of our alumni of record who gave to the institution in a fiscal year. By that, they essentially mean all of our alumni for whom we believe we have a current address or way to contact. It is worth pointing out that this way of talking about alumni giving is slightly different than institutions might prefer or choose to do it, all else being equal. Many institutions would think it makes more sense to talk about how many people did you solicit in a particular year, and of those, how many made a gift. That makes a little more sense perhaps because at every institution there are going to be some people who have indicated that they really don't wish to be contacted. US News asks you to leave those people in when calculating your giving rates. You can make an argument either way. If someone's not giving to the institution, US News would frame that as you've done something to make them unhappy or something, and you shouldn't be able to set that aside. There may be lots of other reasons why someone doesn't want to be contacted, but for better or worse, that's how they ask us to report the data. They ask us to report the 2 most recent years worth of data, so it's kind of a rolling 2-year average that irons out some of the ups and downs from any one year to the next. It also makes the number a bit kind of buffered against a lot of change up or down. So if you have one really good year, essentially the impact of that will be divided in half because it's going to be averaged along with last year's number. They ask for data regarding undergraduate students only. We no longer have any graduate programs here, but we did for many years. So we do have graduate alumni of the institution, but those are not factored in for these purposes. They also ask only for degree completers. So again, if there are students who attended Connecticut College for some period, didn't complete, they aren't interested in having those non-degree completers included in the calculation. Finally, this question comes up sometimes, whether the senior class gift can count, because on the one hand, those students aren't quite alumni yet, but they're just about to be, and it is something that institutions focus on as a way to start trying to build habits of giving among the students just as they're graduating. So US News says you can count those gifts as long as you count all of that graduating class kind of in the denominator as alumni of record. So you can't just put the gifts in and then not also include all of the others who may not have given the gift. So that's basically the methodology behind how they do that. This slide gives the actual raw numbers behind the most recent published US News rankings, which they call their 2020 edition. They always, although the rankings come out in fall, in this case, fall of 2019, they sort of post-date their rankings to, I think, probably increase the shelf life of their publication. So we're talking today about the 2020 rankings. And the data that were baked into that in terms of the alumni giving metric were the fiscal 17 and 18 alumni giving statistics. So here we just see the math in 2018, the most recent year at the bottom there, 5762 gifts from a total of 22,340 alumni of record, which gives you a 25.8% giving rate. So average against the prior year as well, we get 25.9. So a little over a quarter of all of our alumni of record who made a gift to the institution. You may or may not, this may or may not be clear, but any sized gift counts for this. So a $5 gift or a $5 million gift for these purposes counts the same. And so that does raise some interesting kind of messaging questions that maybe you could anticipate about if we're interested in improving our giving rates, how exactly do we signal that? Do we, you could say something like any gift, even if $5 will help. On the other hand, you want to be careful of signaling that that's all you may be interested in. Do it rather in a way that helps kind of build habits of giving progressively more over a person's lifetime. So that is the basic data behind our current ranking, which I'll indicate what that is in a moment. The next slide just gives sort of a visual indication of everything that's in the US News formula, arranged kind of from largest to smallest in terms of the percentage of the overall formula, kind of starting in the upper right-hand corner. So I won't go through all of these, but peer assessment is a survey they do of presidents, provosts, and admission deans, where they essentially ask those people to rate every other institution that's in your category of schools, so national liberal arts colleges in our case. 6-year graduation rates factor another major portion of this, essentially, of the students who walk in the door as first-year full-time students. 6 years later, what percentage of those have graduated? So that kind of constitutes a success measure of schools that's talked about a lot. Per student spending, and then another way that they look at graduation rate performance. adds up to a little more than half. The rest, some of which are fairly small, you can sort of see what those are. Alumni Giving, as you can see in the yellow, is about 5% of the overall ranking. So on the one hand, that looks like not all that consequential one way or the other. It's dwarfed in some sense by these others, but without going into a lot of the details, it's true that not all of these sort of are as consequential as they look like for a couple reasons. Some of them just don't change all that much from year to year. So peer assessment, for example, they get these survey results back each year. If you were to look at our results over a 15 or 20-year period, it's almost flat. So there's very little change. You know, we're not going up or down in that. Kind of for better or worse, sometimes if we do things really well or really interesting or innovative things, that may not move the needle much in terms of that anyway. So the upshot of that is that if there's a number of these that are not really changing that much from year to year, it means kind of by definition they can't be the thing that's driving or explaining our change in rank from year to year, which leaves it to the other ones that maybe do bounce around a little bit more and therefore are ones that, you know, if the question is, well, why did we go up or down last year? It may be due to one of these other things where there was a little bit of change that was just enough to move us above or below a school that was ranked kind of closely around us. The next slide, we'll kind of just leave there as a reference material for later. That's the same data, but with a bit more detail about what each of those metrics are. So leaving that for later, if you're interested, you can access this. This slide shows our rank since 1998, a 23-year history of what our ranking has done. We could spend a lot of time on this trying to kind of describe or explain what happened. I think the quickest way to do it in a way is to say not so much that we have fallen steadily, although that's obviously sort of what's happened here, but over this period of time, a lot of schools have, while we've been kind of continuing to perform at the same level or slightly better, lots of other schools have really jumped into this game wholeheartedly and started doing things to get up to the level that we are and surpass us in some instances. So that is part of what's going on in this, you know, top 50 tier of the national liberal arts institutions. So with that background, I want to talk about the second question I talked about addressing, which is where do we stand relative to other institutions, other liberal arts schools. So to give a couple bits of context here, we can talk about the top 50 institutions in the liberal arts category. So that's kind of the top tier or the first page. If you look at this as a publication on the newsstand and open it up, the top 50 institutions are always kind of in this 2-page spread where you can see a lot of that information. And that's where we are, where we want to stay, kind of viewed in shorthand, I think, as sort of, you know, the top tier of liberal arts schools that we want to be part of. We want to be mentioned in that. If you broaden that out to the top 100 institutions, the average alumni giving rate for those schools last year was 27%. If you broaden it even more to all of the national liberal arts schools in that tier, the top 160, it's 23%. So then to return to the number that we talked about earlier of about 26%, that's where we stand. So there's some room for improvement here. We're not wildly out of the ball game, but to put it into a little more context with some schools who you would be more familiar with by name, we can compare ourselves first against NESCAC, the New England Small College Athletic Conference that we are a part of, and you know, which we get a lot of benefits from being mentioned in this set of institutions, which are highly regarded. Some of these are literally the top rated or top 5 rated liberal arts schools in US News. You know, we have a lot of our students who come here also apply to some of these other schools. So it's a select pack to be in. To be fair, these schools are not our true peer institutions in certain ways. If you look at things like what their endowments are or how selective they are, those sorts of measures, it is a tough group to be kind of viewed as competing with for students or in athletics, so on and so forth. But you know, I know these are familiar schools to you, so it's important to see where we stand relative to those. We're kind of now, for the past couple of years at least, bunched with Trinity, reasonably close to Wesleyan, and then some of the other schools are up in the 50s or low 60s as far as their alumni giving rates. By way of comparison with a group of schools that we might call kind of our extended peer group of institutions, schools that some of these schools we have students who are also applying to some of these institutions. Others are not really New England or Northeast schools, but for example, maybe ranked close to us in U.S. News, would include schools like Dickinson, Skidmore, Gettysburg, Hobart and William Smith, Vassar, Union, Whitman, and at the top there, Centre College, which is a kind of a well-regarded liberal arts college in Kentucky that is doing something right on alumni giving compared to some of us. So the blue line there, you can see just where we kind of fall within this pack. And then one final slide, just to put this in a fairly broad context. This is a scatter plot where each dot represents one institution that's in the top 160 liberal arts schools. The horizontal axis there is the alumni giving rate from the 2020 published rankings. So this is actually the 2-year average of alumni giving that we talked about. And then the vertical axis there is just the overall ranking of an institution. So you can plot these in this way to kind of see what the relationship is between these two. And the red dot there sort of in the, towards the lower left is Connecticut College. If you're statistically minded, you might recognize that the dotted line there is a regression line that just kind of is mathematically the closest fit between all of these points to get them kind of the closest to this line. And it serves as sort of a way of making a prediction so that if you knew a school's alumni giving rate, you could follow that dotted line and kind of say, well, here's about what you might predict is their overall ranking if you didn't know anything else about the school. So you can kind of look at this and say, well, on the one hand, given what our ranking is at number 46, you might expect us to have a giving rate closer to 34%. That is, if you moved us over closer to that dotted line. Or you might say, given the alumni giving rate of 26%, you might guess that our ranking overall is something closer to 72. So there's room to be, room for improvement here, I think. Again, if this was all that you knew about the institution. So there are some challenges, but there's also, I think, some good news as well, or some reason to think that it's not insurmountable. And so this gets to kind of the third question about what we could do. So without going into all of the inside details about what US News does with the data that we send in and as they crunch it into their overall rankings and sub-rankings, what they do on a number of these is take data that is related to one another and they kind of cluster it and put it into sub-rankings of various types of things, such as the quality of your faculty and the resources they have is kind of one sub-ranking they do. There's a few others of those. So they do an alumni giving sub-ranking, which means they take everyone's raw data and then they essentially just order it, from 1 on down, and everyone gets a kind of a hierarchical ranking that way. One effect of that is that it compresses schools and puts them in a position whereby, although they're distinguished because their raw numbers are different, you get a situation a bit like as shown here in this kind of finish line from a bike race where, you can see there's 11 cyclists shown here. You could go through and say who is in position 1 through 11, and they're different and there's no ties. On the other hand, they're so closely compressed and packed that there may be not a lot of meaningful differences in the performance of these cyclists. Again, someone wins and someone gets 5th place and so on, and that's just the way that rankings and competitions work. But it also tells us something then about what you can do in a situation like this where there's a lot of compression and everyone's very tightly packed. It raises interesting possibilities for even small improvements having the potential to break you out of a pack and move you up relative to a crowd along these lines. So what we've got in this slide is the sub-rank, that is to say, this isn't our raw percentages of alumni giving, but rather the data that we've sent in, and then US News has essentially put that, in order against all the other schools around us to give us a ranking from, essentially 1 on down to, 160 within the category of liberal arts schools. So you can kind of see how it's moved quite a bit up and down from year to year. And that in itself, as compared to the earlier slides we saw of where the trend lines were, there were some ups and downs, but it was mostly kind of fairly smooth glide paths as opposed to these kind of pretty sharp ups and downs, which tells you something about what the effects are when US News takes the data and then kind of puts it into these rankings. It has an effect on what we see. So we've kind of moved, if you remember over time, our number of alumni giving has kind of gradually decreased, but what that translates then into here is these substantial decreases. If we overlay onto that in this red line, our actual data, there's a big difference here, and we can get even a better sense of that just by focusing on a few of these peaks or valleys. So the dotted lines, for example, in this particular year, you can see our average alumni giving improved from an average of, 2-year average of 43% to 49%, which is a nice jump that we would be happy to have today or at any year. But you see what that then got translated into as far as the overall ranking. The sub-ranking went from 48 to 25, so almost, a 23 place jump. So a few more examples of this. We can scroll forward, look at this particular year. Another example, a little more closer to today, where again, things are even more compressed, I think, among institutions. So in this particular case, a 1% average increase got us a bump of about 10 spots ranked against each other. Can work the other way as well, as you see here, though, where a small downturn can translate into a large decrease as well when shown against the others. So to kind of conclude then of how this can be good news for the institution is that small changes, small improvements can make a big difference. Again, this is also true on some of the other areas in the formula that we could talk about. And it's certainly true here in terms of a living alumni. So just to put some actual numbers onto that then, not in the realm of percentages, which might be a little abstract or hard to wrap your mind around. What I've done here is just show a table where if we were to have taken in fiscal year 2018, the 22,340 living alumni, for about every 225 or so additional donors, that would have improved our giving rate by 1 percentage point. And you can just kind of see the math there. So if we added 0, that would give you the number we did have. Adding 225, 500, 750, and so forth, you can see how that adds up. On the one hand, these are not, incredibly easy numbers to get. I mean, it's obvious. There's obviously reasons why these people didn't give, or reasons why they would have to be maybe convinced or reached out to in a different way. But I think the flip side of that is that 225 doesn't seem outside of the range of possibility, or even 500 perhaps, given a particularly kind of concerted effort. And again, thinking back to the other slides, then we know that a 1 or a 2% increase would have substantial impacts, right? I mean, so there's a few caveats here. If we did it in 1 year, its impact, because they take a 2-year average, its impact would be sort of dampened by the prior year. But if we did it, say, 2 years in a row or 5 years in a row, it would certainly compound on itself and give us the kind of bounces that would really be helpful. And so I think that in a sense, the takeaway from this kind of analysis, hopefully, is that, it is doable, and that, it's a mistake to think that, well, alumni giving within the context of the larger formula, it's not a big component. And so even a small improvement there wouldn't really help us that much. I think to the contrary, I think all of this math shows that, in fact, it would be worth the effort. The results could be dramatic, And because we're so tightly bunched with these other institutions, where we are in the mid 40s or so, that especially because there's often a lot of ties as well, that those ties can break in your favor. It's really a game of inches, and the outcomes could be very dramatic for us as an institution.
Great. So I actually just want to tag on to that. This is Susan Daniels again. When I first saw some of this data, I thought, we know from our perspective that 225 donors is actually a lot. It's a lot of work to move the needle that much. And yet, if we break it down per class and we think about your work as volunteers, we have people giving, who are 80 years out from graduating from Con, but even if you were to take the first 60 years of alumni and alumni and divide that 225 by 60 years, it's less than 4 people per class. If we thought about what would it take to raise 1 or 2 percentage points and you break it down to your class, could we get 4 more people or 8 more people to give within your class? And I think it becomes really tangible at that point and inspiring to be able to see that we can move the needle for that. So we'd like to open up for questions, comments, suggestions for about 7 to 10 minutes. So we are going to unmute you all, and then hopefully we can just take turns. All right, everybody should be unmuted.
I do have one question. How much have the giving days, the special giving days we've done, contributed to the numbers?
Absolutely. Does somebody else want to?
I think, and we're going to actually talk about Giving Tuesday in a minute. But I think that, if you look at just Giving Tuesday alone, our goal was to raise last year was 240 donors to raise 1% of participation. And you have to look at how many of those are new donors versus people who have already given that fiscal year again. And we were pretty close to doing that. And so, do you want to go? I don't know.
Yeah, just to let you know, we received 3,400 donors during our 48-hour challenge day on Founders Day. So that's a significant amount. They do have a huge impact.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say we always have to keep into account. We appreciate so much how a lot of you too are you'll give a second time on a giving day, and so we have to be thoughtful of if it's new donors on the giving days versus new fiscal year donors versus old. But these are the giving pushes. These giving days are very significant to help us with this. So. Absolutely. Great question. Yeah.
Yep. So I think we want to continue raising the bar in terms of those giving days, but also be mindful that you can't do too many of them, otherwise it just dilutes the message.
Mm-hmm.
Other thoughts, comments?
This is Jen. I have a question. So a couple of years ago, there was a really great campaign that I think helped educate alumni that was called Every Camel Counts. And I don't know if we're still talking about that, but I think that there's an ongoing educational piece of this as we have new alumni graduating every year. And as people drift in and out of that, interested in making a gift to the college, to really continue to talk about that and ensure people know that it really is not about the size of the gift.
Love it. It's a great reminder. Yep.
Do we still have that campaign active, or is it something that sort of drifted out over time, or?
We tend to have different messages, kind of themes for the year. So, this year we've kicked off with what makes a camel, and talking about kind of the different components of a student that make up their experience. But I love the idea of, every camel counts, and that it could be an easy tagline or something that we use, or even a hashtag that just is enforcing and reinforcing that message. Jenna is also working this year with what we call our student advancement officers. Some of that is trying to educate undergraduates about why participation is important, because we have a captive audience right now while they're here on campus, and you know, so that they know why we're going to ask them for gifts. So we want to start that education early, and then hopefully that also starts rolling into some of those earliest graduates, because as we think about participation too, so that when you're thinking about the percentage of participation, part of the reason that the number has been going down, I mean, there are a lot of reasons, and we have a lot of that data, is the denominator keeps growing. Right. So we graduate out more seniors or more new alumni than die or leave our alumni population. Yeah. So that's those young classes are not giving at the same participation rates, even as those who are older or continuously giving. So the denominator continuing to grow is part of the reason that the percentage goes down. So it's a bit of a you know, it's a challenge that we just need to keep fighting against. Great. Any other questions for John, maybe on data? When John and Ellen and I met earlier this week to talk about some of these slides and what's going to be most helpful to volunteers, I was blown away by some of these statistics, and I said, so John, if you could change 3 things at Con that would help our ranking in this, one of the answers was,
yeah, alumni giving. I mean, there's a couple more, but again, I mean, as I've sort of analyzed this over the years, it isn't what it appears, where you say, oh, well, this survey they do of presidents, that must be the most important thing that drives the rankings. And, it's, again, it just doesn't change that much from year to year. Or something like student faculty ratio. I mean, everyone talks about that as if it's a key quality indicator about a school. Like, are there 9 or 10 students in a class with 1 faculty member? And it just is not the kind of thing that ever changes at most institutions. And so therefore it literally can't be the thing that explains why you moved up or down. And so I think there's a pretty big chunk of the formula that's like that. It's, to be cynical for a moment, that US News leaves in there because it looks like they're being scientific and leaving no stone unturned about how to measure the quality of an institution. But it's, you can take almost all of that out and still have the same kind of explanatory power about where the rankings ended up.
So we hope that this helped to give you some talking points. In our follow-up, we will be sending you this recording, which will include these slides, so you'll have those reference points. You can also find John's info on our website. So if you have individual questions or are seeking more data, please feel free to be in touch with any of your liaisons or John directly, if I might be so bold.
Absolutely. No. Again, we love to talk about it sometimes, as long as there's nothing else going on.
So great. Thank you very much. We're going to let John get on with his day as we finish up our agenda.
Thank you.
Great. All right. So what I'm going to talk to you a little bit about is peer-to-peer outreach and what you can do to help us and help the college reach our fundraising goal this year. So peer-to-peer outreach is one of the most effective ways to fundraise, and studies have shown that alumni are 3 times as likely to contribute when asked by a peer. Last year, the college received 6,100 contributions from alumni spanning about 9 decades. And so Susan had broken this down earlier. So if each class from the past 6 decades increased their class's individual giving by only 5 donors consistently, it would result in an increase of 225 donors and over 1 percentage point. So I think in that way it makes it quite feasible. So what I want to do is encourage you all to reach out to your class managers, and your class managers will reach out to you to look at your class list and identify at least 5 individuals that you can reach out to ask for a contribution before the end of the calendar year. So the most effective way to communicate your message is via phone, email, or handwritten note. We encourage you to do any one of these or all of them. We also suggest you use social media if you are on any platforms, and I know many of you are, and that just helps you amplify your message to a broader audience. And so with that said, we're going to talk about Giving Tuesday. Jenna's going to talk about it more and what we're doing on our social media platforms and what you can do to spread the word. So
yes, yeah, and like someone mentioned before, I think it was Karen, but that the giving days are very important to allow you guys to have an opportunity to interact more, kind of have an excuse almost to interact and talk to your classmates a little bit more about giving. It can make it more comfortable for you. You can be backing on this give day. It's not just out of the blue asking your classmates for gifts. We're very appreciative that you guys are involved in these giving days and helping us out this way. So the college has only really participated in Giving Tuesday for about 2 or 3 years now, I would say, in a more pointed way, and you guys have all helped us with that, which is really appreciated. So Giving Tuesday, I think it began 6 or 7 years ago nationally, and it's a way to combat kind of the consumeristic mindset that tends to happen after Thanksgiving. So Black Friday, Small Business Saturday, which we love, right? We love supporting small businesses, but it's taking away kind of from the messaging of thankfulness and generosity. And then Cyber Monday we have as well. So Giving Tuesday is kind of a way to promote being mindful of generosity and being mindful of giving back as we're entering into the holiday season. And us personally as a college, all of us, you know, I think our community, the Con community, is a beautiful representation of students who are, and students and you as alum who are very mindful of giving back to your community and being a part of something bigger than yourself. And so I think that Giving Tuesday is something that even our students on campus get really excited about. So we have, again, a crowdfunding page. It looks similar to, if you remember from the Founders Day Challenge this past year and Giving Tuesday last year. So we'll show that to you now. So it has the countdown clock that'll run until the end of Giving Tuesday. And as mentioned before, our theme for the annual fund this year and for our giving this year is what makes a camel a camel, and it's really highlighting all the dynamic aspects of our students. So we wanted to utilize that for our Giving Tuesday campaign this year. So if you go up to the Spread the Word tab, this is where we're going to house a lot of the resources that you can utilize to spread the word in text messages, you know, using some of the wording in emails or on phone calls and things like that. But Giving Tuesday is really a digital campaign. It's really social media based, and that's what the organization kind of encourages. So we have a bunch of images that you can save to your phone or to your desktop. Any way you would do that normally, and you can post them on your Instagram stories, on Instagram, Facebook. We also encourage you to utilize these images below to change your profile. So to have your profile picture change your cover photo on Facebook just for the 24-hour period to kind of make people be like, why are they doing that? What's going on? So the college will be doing that as well. Did I miss anything? I don't know if we'll reach out each of your managers. We'll probably within the next week when we touch base about, because I know a lot of us haven't given because of our CRM issues and things like that, haven't given the class list to you yet, and so we are hoping to be able to do that. I think I personally, at least for my 15 classes, within this next week. So when we do that, and also with this follow-up, we'll provide you with a lot of these resources as well, so you don't have to go to the website if you don't want to. Is that it?
I think that's it.
Cool. Thank you.
Do you want to do end of year, and then we can wrap up with
Sure.
some, if anybody has questions at the end, we can do a full Q&A at the end.
Sure, so I just have the easy task of kind of listing out the remainder of our communications for the end of our calendar year, and then of course we'll update you as we move into the spring semester and what our plans are for the spring semester. But many of you have been involved with our class gift officer emails and letters, so thank you for your feedback on those. We're finalizing those as we speak, so the letters will hopefully go to print today or tomorrow, and hopefully you should all get those. Those of you who have signed up for letters, we'll hopefully get those in the next week or so. And then the email is, if your classes instead wanted to do an email, that is hoping to go out on Monday. So all good things, kind of ramping up for Giving Tuesday as well. So they'll hear from you and then get some more more information on Giving Tuesday as well. So those are forthcoming. We, as Jenna just mentioned, we have Giving Tuesday communications going out. So those will be mostly surrounding the day of Giving Tuesday. So we have something planned that day, of course. As she mentioned, very digital driven, so it'll be a lot on social media, but we'll have some email communications kind of a week out and then maybe a couple days ahead of time and then the day of. We have the annual calendar mailing planned to go out, so that typically goes to all of our donors from the previous fiscal year, so FY19 donors will be receiving that, and that's scheduled to go out in mid-December at this point. And of course, that does have a little ask in there as well. So if you haven't made your gift, or if your classmates haven't made their gift by that point, they can fill that out or go online and give in that way. We have a CAN outreach, which is very exciting. So we have a new challenge coming up, which should just have been launched today. Some of you might have received that email, but we have an exciting challenge from Tim Armstrong, class of 1993. So he has, we had a couple launch parties recently at the end of October, and he announced that he would be making a $250,000 challenge gift and kind of matching up to that amount from anyone who's giving to the Camel Athletics Fund. So we're excited to have that. We're hoping to reach our goal of $500,000 by the end of the calendar year. So we'll be getting an email out. An email should have gone out today. And then we'll be doing some follow-up through the next month or so to really try to hit that goal. Anything I missed on that? Looking at Stephanie as our resident athletic person. We'll have some 1911 Society communication. So Karen, I know you're involved with that, and I'll get in touch with you and Vic, Ellie, and Grace. So we'll get that moving at the end of this year as well. And then we have, of course, our kind of end of calendar year messages. So of course, we'll do something before the end of the calendar year and get kind of tag along to some tax deductible messaging.
And it's an exciting time. Maybe do you want to mention for the Camel Athletics Network? We've got great news here on campus that is helping to propel some of these messages forward.
Yep, so we're all really excited here. It's the first time actually in program history that our men's soccer team has advanced to the Sweet 16 of the NCAA tournament. So if we've got any Camels near the Philadelphia area, they'll be playing against Swarthmore at Swarthmore College on Saturday. So we're all really excited and hopefully see a few more wins for them.
Yay. Great. All right. And then just quickly to let you all know, in the coming weeks, we're going to be sending a survey out to all CC Fund volunteers. Our goal is to review your volunteer experiences, interests, skills, and measure your satisfaction with the program's current structure, and also inquire how we can improve the program. We're looking to get 100% participation from everyone, so please make sure to complete it when you receive the email. Thank you.
Great. So in our remaining time, we just covered a lot between peer-to-peer outreach, Giving Tuesday, end of calendar year messages, and the survey. So happy to field any questions, thoughts, comments from all of you. No, we explained it perfectly, didn't we? Don't be shy.
Actually, I have a question. Are contributions to the Camels Athletic Network considered restricted annual fund, or is it separate?
So they are part of the Connecticut College Fund, but they will specifically go to the Camel Athletics Fund, and or people can choose to have it go to specific sport or sports.
Okay.
So there's kind of an overarching, it's almost like a series of umbrellas, I think of it. So there's the Connecticut College Fund, There's the Camel Athletics Fund, which is distributed and spent on all of the athletic programs. And then under that, you can select individual sports. And it all rolls right back up to the Connecticut College Fund.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions, thoughts? We would love to hear your feedback on this format. How did it work for you? Did you like having a guest speaker? So we'll be following up with each of you in the coming weeks just to hear how this worked and what else you might like to hear about as guest speakers in areas of the campus that would help you with your work on behalf of this wonderful institution. Is there anything else in conclusion? I think the other thing we're going to reach out about is our most recent mailing that we sent was the What Makes a Camel theme. It had 4 students. It was like a
Wow.
multi-fold mailer piece. And we're just curious how that resonated with people. You know, we actually haven't heard a lot of feedback. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. So just curious if you're hearing from anybody who received it, or if you received it, you know, what your thoughts were. So we'll reach out with those questions as well. Unless anybody has any feedback at this moment.
Great.
Great. All right. Well, thank you all so much for your time. Finishing 2 minutes early. It was really a great pleasure to see you all today. Thank you. And thank you, as always, for the hard work that you do. So go Camels.
Thank you. Bye.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Bye. Happy Thanksgiving.
Bye.